Fear has a smell. Clara knew it well. It tasted like stale metal and cheap mint, the exact scent on Derek's breath as he pushed her against the service station. He thought he had the upper hand, cornering her during the busy dinner hour, in a place where she had to keep smiling. He was wrong. From a dark corner booth, cold eyes watched every angry step he took. Derek did not know he was in danger. He did not know who was watching. Glasses clinked against the polished wooden bar as Clara dropped another load of dirty cups into the sink. Her feet ached, a deep pain that ran from her worn shoes all the way up her back. It was almost 11 p.m. on a rainy Thursday night, and the quiet hum of the Onyx Lounge was slowly dying down. The jazz band in the corner had packed up their instruments an hour ago, leaving only soft recorded music playing in the dim room. Clara leaned against the bar for 5 seconds, closing her eyes, breathing in the smell of expensive whiskey, melted candle wax, and lemon polish. This place was her safe space. It was not perfect. The hours were long and the manager was demanding, but it was safe. It was a place built on fancy drinks and rich customers who mostly kept their hands to themselves. More importantly, it was a place Derek could not reach her. At least, that is what she told herself. She opened her eyes and grabbed a clean towel, wiping down the brass taps hard. Her reflection looked back at her in the curved metal, tired eyes, dark circles hidden under cheap makeup, hair pulled back so tight it gave her a headache. She was 26, but some days she felt 50. Surviving 4 years with a man like Derek had a way of aging a person from the inside. "Table 4 needs another round," Rick the bartender said, sliding a tray of whiskey glasses toward her. "And he's asking for the check." Clara looked toward the back of the room, the corner booth always covered in heavy shadow. Sitting there was Arthur Moretti. He was a regular customer, though regular felt like too small a word for a man who seemed to control the air in the room. Arthur was in his late 30s, with sharp, hard features that looked like they belonged on an old coin rather than a modern man. He was not classically handsome. His face was rough, marked by a thin scar through his left eyebrow, and his eyes were a strange, pale gray. He wore expensive suits that looked like armor. He never brought a woman with him, never laughed, and never raised his voice. People whispered that he owned half the buildings in the financial district. Some said he controlled the shipping ports through fear and violence. The rumors said he was part of a powerful crime family, and that Arthur Moretti was not just a businessman. Clara picked up the heavy tray, her movements steady from years of practice. She was not afraid of Arthur. Oddly, he was the easiest table in her section. He never expected small talk. He never looked at her the way some rich men did, with a hungry, entitled stare. When Arthur looked at her, he simply saw her. She walked through the maze of tables toward the corner booth and set down a fresh glass, quietly taking the empty one away. "Your check, Mr. Moretti," she said softly, placing the leather folder on the table. Arthur did not reach for it right away. He sat still, his large hands resting flat on the wood. He looked tired tonight. The shadows under his pale eyes were deep, and his tie was pulled loose, a rare crack in his usually perfect appearance. "It's quiet tonight," Arthur said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel, with a faint accent that was hard to place. "The rain keeps the casual drinkers away," Clara replied, keeping her tone calm and polite. "Only the serious ones brave a storm like this." Arthur picked up his glass, watching the golden liquid catch the low light, or the ones with nowhere better to be. His eyes flicked up to her. "You look tired, Clara." It was a simple thing to say, but it made her chest tighten. People rarely noticed her unless they wanted something from her. To most of the world, she was just someone who carried trays, took orders, a background character in their expensive lives. "Just a long shift," she said smoothly, giving a practiced, empty smile. Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not believe the lie. Men who survived in his world learned to read people carefully. He studied the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped the empty tray too tightly, her knuckles turning white. "You should not walk to the station alone tonight," he said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a sleek black wallet and dropped several bills into the folder without even looking at the total. "Take a real cab, not the subway." "Mr. Moretti, that's too much money," Clara said, staring at the cash. The tip alone was more than she made in 3 shifts. "It's exactly what I meant to leave," Arthur said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He slid out of the booth, standing tall over her, over 6 feet of solid muscle and tailored wool. "Good night, Clara." "Good night," she murmured, watching his broad back as he walked toward the exit. 2 men in dark suits, who had been sitting quietly at the bar, followed a few steps behind him. Clara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. She picked up the leather folder, feeling the heavy weight of the cash, feeling both grateful and strange about it. For one small second, she imagined what it would feel like to have even a little of Arthur Moretti's power, to walk through the world without fear. She shook the thought away. Survival meant keeping her head down, not dreaming about power. She turned back toward the service station, wanting only to finish her side work and go home to her locked apartment. She had no idea that the small, careful life she had built was about to fall apart. The kitchen smelled of bleach and cold grease. Clara pushed through the heavy swinging doors, her arms full of empty dishes and dirty plates. The dishwashers had already gone home, leaving the metal sinks piled high for the morning crew. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerators and steady rain hitting the alley door. She moved without thinking, scraping plates into the trash bin. Her mind was already on the walk home, the cab fare, the rent due on Tuesday, the electric bill she needed to talk her way into paying late. The numbers ran through her head like a tired, endless list. A sharp metal sound broke her focus. Clara froze. The sound came from the heavy steel door leading to the back alley. It was supposed to be locked from the inside, used only by staff taking out the trash. She turned slowly, her heart picking up an uneven, frightened rhythm. The door was slightly open, a strip of wet yellow light spilling into the dim hallway. "Rick," Clara called out, her voice shaking more than she wanted. "If you're smoking back there, make sure the door shuts. The draft is freezing." No one answered. A cold feeling spread across her back. Her mind told her it was probably just wind, or a stray cat knocking something over. But something deeper, something built from years of learning to sense danger, screamed at her to run back to the dining room. Before she could move, the heavy door groaned open further, and a man stepped out of the rain. Clara's lungs froze. She stopped breathing completely. "Hello, Claire Bear." The nickname hit her stomach like a punch. Derek. He stepped into the harsh light of the hallway, and the sight of him made her feel sick. He looked worse than when she had left him 8 months ago. His hair was wet and stuck to his forehead. His clothes were wrinkled, and his jaw was set in that same aggressive way that always came before he lost control completely. His eyes were wide, his pupils huge and black. He was high. Cocaine, maybe something worse. "What are you doing here?" Clara demanded, fighting to keep her voice steady. She stepped back, putting the heavy steel prep table between them. "How did you find me?" Derek gave a crooked, humorless smile. "You think you're clever, moving to the city, blocking my number? Took me a while, I'll admit, but your dumbass brother still uses the same password on his social media. Found your messages to him." Anger flashed through her fear for a moment. She was going to kill her brother. "You need to leave, Derek. Right now. I'm working, and if my manager sees you back here, he'll call the police." Derek laughed, a harsh, scraping sound. He walked further into the kitchen, his wet boots squeaking on the floor. "Call them? What are they going to do? Arrest a guy for wanting to see his girlfriend?" "I am not your girlfriend." The words came out sharp and final. "We are done. We have been done for almost a year. Get out." His smile vanished instantly. The sudden shift from mocking to pure anger was something Clara had seen 100 times, and it always froze her in place. Derek did not handle rejection well. He did not see Clara as a person who could make her own choices. He saw her as something that had wandered away from him by mistake. He lunged forward fast, closing the distance between them. He slammed his hands on the prep table, leaning over it so his face was inches from hers. The smell of cheap mint gum failed to hide the sour stink of alcohol and unwashed clothes. "You don't get to tell me when we're done," he hissed, his voice dropping to a low, ugly whisper. "You owe me, Clara. I kept a roof over your head for 4 years. I paid your bills when you couldn't find work. You don't get to just walk away and play independent woman in some fancy bar. You drank my paycheck every week. You stole from me, she fired back, her hands shaking so hard she gripped the table edge to hide it. You hit me. I don't owe you a damn thing. I hit you because you never knew when to shut your mouth, he sneered, completely unbothered. He walked around the table, cutting off her path to the dining room doors. Cold panic flooded through Clara. She was trapped in the back hallway. The kitchen was built to keep noise away from the guests up front. Rick was wiping down the bar, completely unaware of what was happening in the back. Derek, please. Clara changed her tone, using the calm, careful voice she used to calm him down in the past. Just go. If you need money, I have some in my locker. Take it and leave. He scoffed, reaching out and grabbing her wrist. His fingers dug into her skin hard enough to bruise. I don't want your waitress tips. I want you to pack your things and come outside. My car's down the block. We're going home. Let go of me. Clara yanked her arm, but his grip was like iron. Stop fighting me, he barked, his voice bouncing off the tile walls. He pulled her toward him violently, his other hand rising to grab her by the throat, not squeezing yet, but holding her in place, pressing her back against the cold metal door of the walk-in freezer. You think you're better than me now, he spat, his spit hitting her cheek. Serving drinks to rich people. You're nothing. You're trash, Clara, and you're coming with me whether you want to or not. Tears of pure frustration filled her eyes. She clawed at his hand on her throat, her nails digging into his skin, but the drugs in his system made him immune to the pain. She was going to die here. The thought hit her with terrible clarity. If she got in that car with him, she was never coming back. What neither of them realized was that the heavy swinging doors leading to the main dining room had been propped open by a small rubber wedge the busboys used. And out in the dining room, Arthur Moretti had never actually left. Arthur had planned to leave. He had walked out the front doors of the Onyx Lounge, pulling his coat collar up against the driving rain. His driver, Paul, had the engine of the armored car running, warm exhaust rising into the cold night air. But something had made Arthur pause on the curb. A shadow in the alley. A flicker of movement where there should not have been any. Arthur's life was built on caution. It was not a weakness. It was how he survived. He did not run an empire by ignoring things that felt wrong. He had watched a man in a wet jacket slip down the narrow service alley beside the restaurant. It could have been anyone, a man looking for shelter from the rain, but the deliberate, purposeful way the man walked bothered Arthur's sharp instincts. He turned to Paul, raising one finger to signal him to wait, and stepped back inside the lounge. He did not return to his booth. He stood in the shadows near the coat check, completely still, listening. He heard Rick humming behind the bar, washing glasses. Then, under the sound of rain and quiet music, he heard the muffled, frightened tone of a woman pleading for something. Arthur moved silently, his shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. He approached the kitchen doors and looked through the small gap left by the doorstop. His pale gray eyes found the scene in the hallway. He saw Clara, her back pressed against the freezer door, her face pale and twisted in fear. He saw the man, thin and shaking, his hand wrapped around her throat, holding her in place. Arthur did not feel anger in the usual sense. Anger was loud and messy, the kind of feeling that clouded good judgment. What Arthur felt instead was a sudden, cold drop in temperature inside himself. It was a clear, controlled fury that slowed his heartbeat and sharpened his focus. He knew men like the one holding Clara. The world was full of them. Weak, pathetic men who used violence to control the only things they could ever control. Arthur was a violent man too. He had ordered men killed. He had ended lives with his own hands. But his violence had always been business. Power, strategy, necessity. He did not terrorize people who could not fight back. He hated men who fed on the weak. And on a deeper level, Arthur recognized something else. Clara belonged to his quiet world. She poured his drinks. She respected his silence. This drug-addicted man was ruining Arthur's peace. Inside the hallway, Derek was losing control completely. "I said we're leaving," he screamed, pulling his hand back like he was about to hit her across the face. Clara closed her eyes tightly, turning her head away, bracing for the impact. The impact never came. Instead, the kitchen doors burst open with such force that they slammed against the walls, the hinges screaming in protest. Derek froze, his hand still raised in the air, and turned his head sharply. Arthur Moretti stood in the doorway. He had not rushed. He had not pulled out any weapon. He simply stood there, an unmovable figure of quiet, terrifying authority. The dim light caught the scar above his eye, making his expression look almost demonic. "Take your hand off her," Arthur said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It sounded like a judgment being delivered. Derek, driven by drugs and adrenaline, did not fully understand the danger he was in. He saw a man in a suit interfering, and his bruised ego flared up. "Back off, suit," Derek snarled, tightening his grip on Clara's throat slightly. "This is private business. Go back to your expensive drink before I mess up that pretty jacket of yours." Clara opened her eyes, gasping for air as Derek's fingers dug in harder. She stared at Arthur, her eyes wide with disbelief and pure terror. "Run!" She wanted to scream at him. "He's dangerous." But Arthur did not run. A slow, cold smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was a smile with no humor in it at all. "You have exactly 3 seconds to remove your hand from her neck," Arthur said, stepping slowly into the kitchen. "If you do not, I am going to break your arm in 3 places, and then I am going to remove your teeth." Something in Arthur's calm, sincere voice cut through even the thick fog of Derek's high. His confidence began leaking away. He looked into Arthur's flat, unbothered eyes and understood, somewhere deep down, that this was not a rich man trying to play hero. This was a predator looking at prey. Derek stammered, his grip on Clara loosening slightly. "1," Arthur said, taking another step closer. Derek let go of Clara completely, stumbling backward. Clara slumped against the freezer door, coughing violently, her hand flying to her bruised throat. "Listen, man, you don't know the situation," Derek tried, holding his hands up. "She's my girl. She's just being difficult. We have history." "2," Arthur said softly. He was now only an arm's length away. Derek's nerve broke completely. He lunged toward the alley door, desperate to escape into the rain. He did not make it. Arthur moved with a speed that did not match his large frame. His left hand shot out, grabbing Derek by the back of his wet jacket, jerking him backward hard enough to snap his head back. Before Derek could scream, Arthur's right hand clamped around his throat, mirroring exactly what Derek had done to Clara moments before. But Arthur was not trying to scare him. He lifted Derek and slammed him against the steel prep table. The heavy table slid back several inches with a screech. Derek gasped, clawing at Arthur's wrist, his legs kicking as Arthur lifted him onto his toes. "History is dead," Arthur whispered, leaning close so his face was inches from Derek's terrified, bulging eyes. "And if you ever come within a mile of this building, or within sight of this woman again, you will join it. Do you understand me?" Derek could not speak. He could only make a choking sound, nodding frantically, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple as Arthur pressed just enough to make his point clear. Arthur held him there for 5 long seconds, letting the fear burn permanently into the man's mind. Then, with a look of pure disgust, he tossed Derek aside like garbage. Derek crumpled to the floor, gasping and coughing. He scrambled backward like a crab, slipping on his wet shoes, until he hit the push bar of the alley door and burst out into the rain, disappearing into the night without looking back. Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by rain and Clara's ragged breathing. Arthur pulled a clean white handkerchief from his pocket and slowly wiped his hands. His face showed no emotion. He turned to look at Clara. She was still pressed against the freezer, shaking, staring at him like she was seeing him for the very first time. The quiet man who tipped well and drank his whiskey neat was gone. In his place stood something far more dangerous. Arthur did not offer comforting words. He did not tell her everything would be fine. He simply looked at the red marks forming on her pale throat. "Get your coat, Clara," Arthur said, his voice returning to its usual low, rough tone. "What?" she whispered. "Your shift is over," Arthur said, his pale eyes locking onto hers. "You are not taking a cab tonight. I am taking you home." Adrenaline is a liar. It tricks the body into feeling strong and fast, right up until it disappears and drops you onto the hard floor of reality. Clara felt the crash the moment she stepped out the back door of the Onyx Lounge. Her legs felt like wet paper. She pulled her cheap winter coat tight around her shoulders, though it did nothing to block the damp Chicago night. A sleek black car sat waiting at the curb, out of place next to the old cars parked along the street. The driver, a broad man with a neck like a tree trunk, stood holding the back door open. Rain hit his dark suit, but he did not blink. He stared straight ahead like a silent guard. Clara hesitated on the sidewalk. Every part of her told her not to get into a car with Arthur Moretti. She had just watched him nearly crush a man's throat with the same calm ease most people use to swat away a fly. "Get in, Clara." Arthur was already seated inside, half hidden in the dark leather seats. He was not looking at her. He stared straight ahead, his face unreadable. She swallowed hard, wincing as pain spiked through her throat. Derek's fingerprints were going to leave bruises by morning. Too tired to argue, she climbed into the car. The heavy door shut behind her with a solid thud that cut off the sound of the rain completely. The inside smelled like leather and the faint scent of Arthur's cologne. It felt like a strange kind of safety. "Drive, Paul," Arthur said quietly. The car pulled away smoothly. For a while, the only sound was the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Clara stared out the tinted window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of color. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop her body from shaking. She hated this. She hated feeling small. For 4 years, she had bent herself around Derek's moods, learning to read him like a sailor reads storm clouds. Getting away from him was supposed to mean the fear was over. Instead, it felt like the world had simply traded one dangerous man for a far more powerful one. "There's water in the console beside you," Arthur said, breaking the silence. He still had not turned his head. Clara looked down. A cold bottle of water sat in the cup holder. Her throat felt like sandpaper. She reached for it, but her hand shook so badly she fumbled the cap. A large hand covered hers. Clara froze. Arthur's hand was warm, his grip gentle, a strange contrast to the violence she had just watched him do with those same fingers. He took the bottle, twisted off the cap, and handed it back. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Arthur finally turned to look at her. In the passing streetlights, his pale eyes studied the damage, lingering on the red marks rising on her neck. A muscle moved in his jaw, tight and controlled, but his voice stayed flat. "He knows where you work," Arthur said. It was not a question. "He found my brother's social media," Clara admitted. "Figured it out. He's persistent when he's using." "Using," Arthur repeated, the word sounding bitter in his mouth. "A drug addict. It doesn't matter." "It matters," Clara said, trying to sound stronger than she felt. "I'll talk to my manager tomorrow. Maybe switch to day shifts. Keep the kitchen locked. I just need to be more careful." Arthur let out a low, humorless sound. "Careful does not stop men like that, Clara. A locked door only makes them break the window. He believes he owns you. Men driven by drugs and entitlement do not respond to scheduled changes." "So what am I supposed to do?" Frustration finally broke through her calm. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. "I can't afford to move again. I can barely afford where I live now. I can't quit my job. I just have to survive it." "Nobody survives forever playing defense," Arthur said calmly, unbothered by her anger. "Eventually you get tired, and you miss something." Clara looked away, her jaw tight. She knew he was right, and she hated him a little for saying it so plainly. "I didn't ask for your help tonight, Mr. Moretti. I'm grateful. I really am. But I am not your problem." "My name is Arthur," he corrected softly. He shifted slightly toward her. "And you are not a problem. You pour my drinks. You don't talk to me like I'm a walking bank account. And you don't stare at the scar on my face. You give me peace in a city that rarely offers any. So whatever threatens you, threatens my peace." It was one of the strangest, most honest things anyone had ever said to her. He was not playing hero. He was protecting something small and steady in his own chaotic life. And yet, underneath the cold logic, she saw something human in his pale eyes, a rigid sense of right and wrong buried under years of necessary violence. "Where do you live, Clara?" he asked. She gave him the address, a rough neighborhood far from the polished floors of the Onyx Lounge. Arthur simply nodded and tapped the privacy glass. The car turned smoothly, heading toward the poorer part of the city. The Lincoln stopped outside a worn, four-story building, its front door propped open with a broken brick. Clara reached for the door handle. "Thank you for the ride, Arthur. You really didn't have to." "Wait." Arthur stepped out into the rain and walked around to open her door himself. "I can walk up by myself," she said, shrinking back slightly. "I have no doubt you can," Arthur said. "But tonight, I am walking you to your door." She did not have the energy to argue. Inside, the hallway smelled of damp carpet. They climbed to the third floor in silence, Arthur scanning every doorway and shadow like he was checking for danger. At her apartment door, she fumbled with her keys, her hands still shaking. Arthur studied the flimsy wooden frame. "You need a better lock. A man with a heavy boot could break that door in one kick." "It's what I can afford," she snapped, immediately regretting her tone. Arthur reached into his jacket. Clara flinched instinctively, a reflex built from years with Derek. Arthur froze, noticing the flinch, a flash of something dark crossing his pale eyes. He moved slower this time, pulling out a plain, heavy card with only a phone number printed on it. "There will be a man parked at the end of your street starting tonight," Arthur said, his voice low and calm. "His name is Elias. If you see a car you don't recognize, or if you feel unsafe, you call this number. He will answer, day or night." Clara stared at the card, feeling its strange weight in her hand. "Why are you doing this?" Arthur's scar pulled tight as his face hardened. "Because the world is full of wolves, Clara, and sometimes they need to be reminded who actually owns the woods." He turned and disappeared down the stairs before she could say anything else. Clara stood alone in the hallway, holding the card to her chest. For the first time in 4 years, she locked her door and did not feel afraid of the dark. Morning came with the aching stiffness of someone recovering from a crash. Clara sat on the edge of her mattress, staring at the floor. Her throat felt tight, filled with what felt like broken glass every time she swallowed. When she finally forced herself up to the small bathroom mirror, it confirmed what her body already knew. The bruises were dark, forming a ring of purple and yellow around her throat. Derek's fingerprints were clearly marked on either side. She spent 20 minutes covering her neck with thick makeup, blending it until the swelling was less noticeable. She pulled on a high-neck black sweater, grabbed her bag, and double-checked the lock before leaving. Outside, a plain gray car sat parked across the street, engine idling quietly. It did not belong in this neighborhood. It was too clean, too careful. The engine gave a small, quiet rev, not aggressive, just an acknowledgement. "I see you, Elias." Arthur had not been exaggerating. He had stationed a permanent watcher outside her building. Clara pulled her collar up and started walking to the train station. The gray car followed at a slow, steady distance, never crowding her, never letting her out of sight. Her phone buzzed constantly with missed calls and voicemails from unknown numbers. She listened to the first one. "Clara, pick up the phone. I'm sorry, okay? I was messed up last night. You know how I get when I'm stressed. That guy, you think he cares about you? You're a joke to him. Pick up the damn phone, Clara, or I swear." She deleted it before he could finish. The rest were the same, an ugly cycle between crying apologies and angry threats. Arthur did not come to the lounge that night. Clara caught herself glancing at the empty corner booth every time the door opened. She hated the small sting of disappointment she felt. For 4 days, the gray car followed her everywhere, to the grocery store, the laundromat, the train station. For 4 nights, Paul drove her home. And for 4 days, Derek's voicemails grew more and more unstable. He found his chance on a Tuesday afternoon. Rain had been falling since morning, turning the streets into gray slush. Clara had run out of clean uniforms, so she walked to the small laundromat 2 blocks from her apartment, an old fluorescent-lit room filled with broken machines and the smell of bleach. She had left her phone at home, desperate for an hour of quiet. She loaded her clothes, sat down, and pulled out a paperback book, trying to lose herself in it. The gray car sat parked outside, its wipers moving steadily. She did not notice the back door of the laundromat, meant only for taking out trash, quietly propped open. Thought you could just hide behind your new friends forever, didn't you? Clara's blood ran cold. She looked up. Derek stood at the end of the row of washers, soaked and pale, his eyes sunken and wild. His left hand shook, gripping a small box cutter, the blade extended and gleaming under the lights. Clara shot to her feet. Derek, put that away. People are going to see you. Nobody's looking, he hissed, stepping closer. Your little bodyguard out there is watching the front door like an idiot. Didn't see me cross through the alley roofs. He smiled, a hollow, terrifying expression. You ruined my life, Clara. You think you can just walk away and replace me with some suit? I kept you off the streets. I made you. You drained my bank account and hid me. Clara shot back, anger cutting through her fear. You're a drug addict, Derek. You ruined your own life. The truth hit him like a slap. His face twisted with rage. He lunged, raising the box cutter toward her face. Clara screamed, throwing her arms up. A sharp, loud crack echoed through the room. Derek stopped dead. His body went rigid. The box cutter fell from his fingers, clattering to the floor. He made a wet, choking sound and collapsed against the dryer before sliding down to the ground. Clara lowered her arms. A man stood behind where Derek had been, holding a gun with the suppressor still pointed down. He wore a dark jacket and a plain cap. His face was completely forgettable, the kind you would not remember 5 minutes later. It was the driver of the gray car. It was Elias. He looked at Clara, calm and steady. Are you injured, Clara? She could not speak. She looked down. Derek was not dead, clutching his leg, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes wide with shock. Clara stammered, her knees giving out. She slid down against the washing machine. He presented a serious threat, Elias said simply, like he was reading a weather report. He knelt beside her, offering a clean cloth. He came through the roof access next door. A blind spot. I apologize for the delay. Derek began to scream, thrashing weakly. Somebody call a cop. He shot me. Elias did not turn his head. The owner is on an extended break. The cameras were disconnected 20 minutes ago. The police are not coming. Clara stared at him, understanding slowly settling in. This was not an accident. This was a fully managed situation. 2 more men walked in through the back door. They grabbed Derek by the arms and dragged him toward the exit. He tried to scream again, but one man covered his mouth, muffling the sound. Mr. Moretti requested this problem be permanently relocated. Elias said smoothly, he will receive medical care for his leg. After that, he will be placed on a fishing boat off the Alaskan coast. He will have work. He will not have a phone. He will not return to Chicago. Clara sat on the floor, listening to the back door click shut. Derek was gone, erased just like that. She should have felt horrified. Instead, the only emotion she felt was a deep, overwhelming wave of relief. The wolf was gone. But as she watched Elias calmly clean the blood from the floor, she understood something else. She was now deeply connected to a very dangerous man. The silence in Clara's apartment was complete. For the first time in 4 years, her phone did not buzz. No frantic voicemails. No threats. Derek was simply gone, sent away to the cold waters near Alaska. She sat on her worn couch, staring at the blank wall. The quiet efficiency of Arthur's world had reshaped her entire life within minutes. The blood on the laundromat floor had been cleaned. The cameras stayed mysteriously broken. The police were never called. It was as if Derek had ceased to exist the moment he crossed Arthur Moretti. Clara expected to feel crushing guilt. She had watched a man get shot. She had said nothing while he was dragged away. But sitting there in her quiet apartment, breathing in the smell of a cheap candle, all she felt was a strange, deep sense of peace. She was free, and she owed that freedom to a dangerous man. 3 days later, Clara tied her apron and stepped onto the floor of the Onyx Lounge. The bruises on her throat had faded to pale yellow, easily hidden under a silk scarf. Rick gave her a small nod from behind the bar. She worked the floor with a new lightness in her step. The heavy anxiety that always sat on her chest was gone. She did not flinch when the door opened. She did not check the alley when she took out the trash. She knew, without doubt, that nothing in the dark could touch her anymore. The most dangerous thing in the shadows was already watching over her. At 10:30, the heavy doors opened, and Arthur walked in, wearing a dark gray suit, looking as calm and powerful as ever. He walked straight to his corner booth. Paul and another man took their usual seats at the bar. Clara picked up a glass and the bottle of whiskey. Her hands were steady. She walked to his booth and set the glass down, pouring the drink herself. "I didn't expect you back so soon," Clara said quietly. Arthur looked up, his pale eyes flicking to the scarf at her throat before meeting her gaze. Business concluded faster than expected. Clara set the bottle down, but did not walk away. "Elias told me what happened with the boat." Arthur did not blink. He took a slow sip of his drink. "I want to know what this costs," Clara said plainly. "I survived a man who kept track of every dollar he spent on me. He used it to control me. You made a person disappear. You put a man outside my home. I need to know the price." Arthur set his glass down, his expression shifting, genuinely offended. "Do not insult me by comparing me to a pathetic addict who hits women to feel powerful," he said, his voice low and sharp. "I do not keep records with people I choose to protect." "Nobody does something like that for free," Clara said, refusing to back down. "You are looking at this as a victim," Arthur replied coldly. "Stop it. I am a man who demands control over my surroundings. This lounge is part of that. The peace I find in this booth is part of that. That addict was chaos. He brought violence into my space. He touched something that belongs to my sanctuary. I simply removed the problem." He leaned back. "You owe me nothing, Clara. The debt was his for trespassing. It has been paid." Clara stared at him. She looked past the reputation, past the expensive suit, and saw a man deeply alone, guarding the few quiet corners of his life fiercely. He had not saved her to own her. He had saved her because he could not stand watching someone weak be hurt by someone weaker still. "Thank you," she finally whispered. Arthur's hard expression softened, just slightly. "Take the scarf off, Clara." She hesitated, her hand rising to her throat. "The bruises are still there," she said. "Take it off," he said gently. "You have no reason to hide the marks of a fight you survived. Let them see it. Let them know you are still standing." Slowly, Clara unwound the scarf. The yellow and brown marks were clear against her pale skin under the dim light. She felt exposed, but as Arthur looked at her, she did not feel weak. She felt seen. 6 months passed. Winter had finally broken into a heavy Chicago summer. The Onyx Lounge remained the same, but Clara had changed. She moved through the tables with quiet confidence. The exhaustion that once hollowed her eyes was gone. She had asked for a raise, something she never would have had the courage to do a year before. It was a rainy Tuesday night. The lounge was nearly empty. Arthur sat in his usual booth, reading through a small leather book, reading glasses on his nose. Clara picked up the whiskey bottle and 2 glasses. She walked to his booth and, instead of handing him the bill, set both glasses down and poured 2 drinks. Arthur looked up, raising an eyebrow at the second glass. "Rick said I could take my break," Clara said, sliding into the booth across from him without waiting for an invitation. Arthur studied her for a long moment, the clear skin of her neck, the steady way she held his gaze. A slow, real smile crossed his face, transforming it completely. "You are breaking protocol, Clara," he said quietly. "I make the rules in my section," she replied, picking up her glass. They were not a couple in any normal sense. No flowers, no public dinners, no declarations of love. They existed in this shadowed corner booth, bound together by an understanding of the violence that shaped both their worlds. Clara knew exactly what Arthur was. She knew where his money came from. She knew the men guarding his car had killed before, and she accepted all of it. She had learned that good men could hide monsters behind polite smiles and locked doors. Derek had looked like an ordinary man. Arthur was an open devil, and given the choice, Clara found she preferred the devil who kept his promises. Arthur tapped his glass gently against hers. The sound rang clear through the quiet room. "To the sanctuary," Arthur said softly. "To the sanctuary," Clara echoed. She took a sip, letting the warmth settle in her chest. She looked across the table at the dangerous man, who had rewritten the rules of her life. She was no longer just a waitress, and she was no longer a victim. Outside, the rain kept falling against the glass, but inside the dark, quiet booth, the world felt completely, ruthlessly safe.